All right, everybody, we're going to start this consequences. There's that sound again. We're going to start the consequences of agricultural practices with a mental map, or at least a mental image for you. So I want you guys to think about dry land, like semi-arid or arid is the word for that. Nomadic herding, if you remember those people, right? So you got dry land, nomadic herding, pastoral nomadism. Think of the world's largest desert on the world's largest continent. Okay, so your mental map gets you to an area, right, in Africa around the Sahara Desert. Not necessarily in it, because that's already a desert, but the area around it. So that's where you got to think here when we're going through this. All right. So explain, this is our objectives, right? We're going to explain how agricultural practices have environmental and societal consequences. So environment effects of agricultural land use include things like pollution, the change to the landscape itself, desertification, soil salinization, and conservation efforts. Agricultural practices including slash and burn farming, terraces, irrigation, deforestation, draining wetlands, shifting cultivation, and pastoral nomadism. All of those things alter the landscape. Remember that from the culture unit from Unit 3. And then societal effects include agricultural practices, include changing the roles of women in agricultural production and economic output. But that's going to be mostly in 512, which we'll get to a little bit later. Okay, so change it to our natural ecosystems, right? So these are examples of how food is really good. We have more food, so the Green Revolution is awesome, and the Second Revolution was great, and we proved Malthus wrong, and Bostrup was right. But okay, there are consequences, right? So we replaced forests, trees, right, with fields, but the trees aren't coming back. I mean, where we live used to be called the Eastern Woodlands. Our high school used to have trees all over it, and then they took all those trees down and made farmland out of it. Okay, and the family, the Wests, right, they owned all this land. That was their last name, was West, and that's why the school in front of the school, the road is called West Boulevard, right? But this used to all be trees, and then they cut those down. It used to be farmland. Well, those trees aren't coming back here, right? So great. And then the second thing here is grazed animals in areas that are too arid, that are too dry. Those animals have to eat something. The overgrazing leads to desertification. So you actually make the desert bigger. You'll be alarmed at places on the earth that are in danger of becoming a desert because of this practice. Okay, so greenhouse gas emissions from agriculture, from forestry, and other land use. You can see the amount and the different ways in which we don't even think about it. Usually when I think pollution, the first thing I think about is cars. Well, the pollution comes from other ways. Look at the greenhouse gas emissions. Okay, you see the transportation only amounts to 14%. Okay, so the greenhouse gases aren't just cars, it's the energy that we produce. It's the output from the animals, right? Literally from them farting, right? And the gas that they release. Okay, it's from the buildings and the stuff we produce. It's from industry. There's from all kinds of different things. Okay, so there's way more pollution than just our cars. There's pollution all over the place. Okay, all right. So what the hell are you talking about? So what that means, what you see on the map of Africa, is literally a region called Sahel. What Sahel means is like border or the edge, right? North of that darkened area in Africa is the Sahara Desert. So when you talk about desertification, the Sahel region of Africa, this has already happened in some of those places. So this is what the Sahel should look like. Kind of reminds you of the Lion King a little bit. Okay, well, this is what parts of it look like now. Okay, and this picture is so vivid, it looks like it's fake, but it's not fake. You can see the people down in the background of the picture. Okay, you can see the desert and the shifting sand dunes in the background. And there used to be trees here in this area. This was the Sahel, but now the sand, the soil has been taken away by wind erosion because the animals have eaten the roots of the plants that used to be here, right? You can see on the ground in this previous picture that there is at least something, okay, and bushes and things for them to eat. Well, when that stuff's taken out of there because the animals have eaten it in pastoral nomadism, right, then there's nothing there. Okay, so this is desertification. That's not good. All right, so places on the planet that are at risk of this. Of course, you look at Africa, you can see the Sahel, okay, region there that I highlighted earlier, and you can see the desert. Man, that, if this was gone, I think I can make it go away. Maybe I can't. The kind of brownish there, that's arid land. And then the lighter shade is already desert. So you can see the Sahara is a desert. You can see how it's getting bigger and extending out. Okay, that too is not good, right? And look at the southwest part of the United States. There is a desert there. Okay, the Sonoran Desert is down there in Nevada, the basin, right? That's all arid land, but it's could be wider. Now in America and in the developed world, irrigation systems help to prevent that from being a desert. But if something ever happens to the water, if it gets too scarce and we don't have it, then this is a real problem. All right, so modifications of our ecosystem, right? So when we irrigate, we do change the ecosystem, right? If there was nobody on Earth right now, the Ogallala Aquifer in the western part of the United States, it literally is a huge lake that goes from North Dakota to Texas, full of water. Okay, and we take that water and we bring it up now with using irrigation, which is why we can farm that western part of the United States. Okay, without it, there wouldn't be farmland there. Our country would be totally different. Okay, so we irrigate it. That's a good thing, right? But it does lead to water scarcity, and you'll see what I mean by that in a minute. Draining of wetlands. So you damage the home of many plants and animals. You guys have driven past wetlands your entire life. If you ever driven out to Carlisle from here on Route 50, like there's wetlands, you literally travel the road, goes right over the top of them. Okay, that area used to be all swampland. Now it's not really water. There's still moisture there, but there's not nearly as much water as there used to be because those wetlands are being drained for irrigation for other things. Okay, terracing, you'll see some pictures of terracing later. They disrupt the flow of water, okay, and that affects the animals. Some of the pictures of terraces are just, they're breathtaking. It's amazing, but it changes that cultural landscape, changes the landscape, okay, of a place. All right, so here's some wetlands, right? Or drained wetlands. This used to all be water. Why would you have a bridge over something that's not wet? That's stupid, right? Well, because that area has been drained of its water. Now that's no longer a wetland. And so the animals and things used to depend on that moisture. Well, it's not there for them anymore. Okay, shifting cultivation is another example. You'll see a picture of this later too. You know this better as slash and burn farming. Okay, this was one of the ones in your card game. The obvious concern here is that you're burning something and damaging the environment. You're also taking away the homes of animals. Okay, so if you're an animal that lived in the Amazon and somebody burned down the forest, it'd be like somebody burning your house down. Okay, it's the same idea, except it's an animal instead of a person. Okay, so here's that type of agriculture, pastoral nomadism, also known as migratory husbandry, right? It's the same thing, follow the animals. The amount of land available to herders has gone way down. Okay, so if everybody used to be on this amount, now that amount's a lot smaller. Okay, since that amount is smaller, more animals are eating it, and so it's just going to continue to shrink because when you take all the roots out from those plants and the grass and the things that they eat, they have less to eat. And so that's a problem. It continues to get smaller. So overgrazing is what I just described, the animals eating that stuff. It damages the grassland so that grassland can't replenish itself in a natural way. Okay, this leads to wind erosion, like I mentioned earlier in the picture about the Sahel. It also leads to water erosion if there's heavy rains that come into the area. There's no roots in place to hold the soil. So the soil just gets washed away to somewhere else. And that extends the desert, right? So pastoral nomadism also adds to desertification. All right, here's a picture, right? Those animals have to have something to eat, okay, in pastoral nomadism. You can see some green there, okay, but not tons of it. And so if those animals eat all the green, they got to go find some land somewhere else. Well, if that land is no longer green the following year because of desertification, now we got a problem. Okay, so those animals don't have anything to eat. They have to go to places where there are things for them to eat. Okay, why is there less land? There's actually less land than there used to be for numerous reasons. Governments have placed protective borders. Okay, so this could be a border dispute, right, from Unit 4. The Berlin Conference, separating those countries without really the input of the ethnic tribes that live there. Well, those ethnic tribes might not be able to use land that they had traditionally used for their animals because it's across the border. Okay, that's a problem. Former pasture land is now irrigated. So what used to be pasture land or land for animals is now farmland in places where they really need food, which is okay. That makes sense, but there's still less land available for the pastoral nomads. Okay. Also, pasture land is used for mining and petroleum operations because the government or other groups figure out that it's way more valuable to take out the mine, to take out the minerals and take out the petroleum. They can make way more money. So therefore, that's less land for the animals to be on. Okay, another problem that adds to this, because remember, this is the consequences of agriculture. The third agricultural revolution, the Green Revolution, which is aptly named when you look at this picture, right? Human or animal waste was used as fertilizer, and you're like, animal waste or human waste, like, it's disgusting. Well, those things do add nutrients to the soil. Okay, and in some parts of the world, that's what happens. Okay, if you have a synthetic chemical and it's applied to the crops, it damages the water nearby. Okay, like look at this algal bloom in this picture. Look at how green that water is. Guys, this is the water that we drink at our house. That stuff has to get filtered out. Okay, that is brutal to think about, but that's what happens when we put the pesticides and the chemicals on the plants. There's no way around it. That happens. Okay, whether we like to admit it or not. Okay, so animal waste is another problem. I mentioned this earlier. This is a chicken farm. So each one of those chicken greenhouses, okay, has, and what I mean, how many there are, 20 of them in this picture. Man, they have tens of thousands of chickens in them. Okay, in this picture, there's probably 100,000 chickens, right, inside those buildings. Well, I got news for you. Those chickens poo. And when they poo, you got to do something with the waste. You can't just let it build up. So you take it. A lot of times I put them outside. They pile it up, which is fine, whatever. And then it rains. So then the chemicals, the minerals, the terrible stuff in their poo washes across the land into the water. Okay, that is a problem. Okay, and in places where this is right by a stream or something, man, it causes massive amounts of damage. So we have to find ways to fix this. So this is chickens, and this is just one chicken farm. These things are all over the place, including in the United States. Okay, like in the southern part of the U.S., North Carolina, South Carolina, Georgia, these are all over. Okay, so here's a hog farm. Okay, here's the inside of a hog farm. Give you some idea of what you're looking at. Okay, these animals get steroids. These animals get all kinds of chemicals pumped into their bodies so that they're stronger and their meat is better, and so people will purchase it, right? At places like Schnucks and Costco and Sam's, right? So here's the outside of that. Look at that. This is one of the inside of those. Look at how many are there. Those pigs are going to poo, and you got to do something with that, right? That's unbelievable. It's got to go somewhere. All right. So other problem, like I mentioned earlier, is the pesticides. Okay, it kills the insects, and herbicides kill the weeds, right? But these things cause damage to the ecosystem. Killing the insects is okay, right? But what about the actual insects? If you remember the bees guys from the video we did at the beginning of this unit, those guys drive all over the country, okay, with their bees so that the bees can pollinate. They don't know for sure, but man, those pesticides have to have something to do with the bees having a shortage of bees. Okay, so the chemicals that we use are having an effect, and it's not a positive one. Okay, it's giving us more food, but there's an environmental effect of this. All right, so some of the chemicals, like I just mentioned, are given to livestock, okay, the cows and the pigs, to prevent disease, and then the hormones they're given to promote growth, so they're bigger, and they can get you more money if you're the farmer. Same thing happens to chickens. Okay, all this stuff is happening to the animals and to the food we eat. What does this do to us? I mean, we don't know. Does this cause us, to have higher rates of cancer? Does this cause us to have people, having higher rates of heart attack? I mean, or is there no effect at all? Like, we don't know what the outcome is of this, but it's when you stop and think about the chemicals we put that are washing into our water and the chemicals that are pumped into the animals, and then we're eating them. It's like, okay, maybe there is something here. Okay, fossil fuels, right? That's the pollution through exhaust, like through the cars I was mentioning earlier. That stuff goes up in the atmosphere and then it rains. Okay. And that stuff comes back down to our water supply. Right. So things like this, right? Neo-Malthusians, right? That are reliving Malthus's prediction are like, hey, we keep doing this stuff and it's going to happen. Okay. So problems with irrigation, right? Here's the Ogallala Aquifer I mentioned. I said it was North Dakota, but there's South Dakota all the way down to Texas. It's not a direct effect one to the other, although it is definitely an effect. If you look at the picture on the left, that's of Lake Mead, which is dammed up as a result of Hoover Dam, right outside of Las Vegas. Where you see the white, that used to be underwater. That was the natural water level that had been there forever. And in 2015, this picture was taken, and that's how low it is. I actually flew in a helicopter over this, and I don't even know what year, 2010, I think it was maybe 2009. And we noticed the same thing right away, like, holy cow. And the pilot to the helicopter was like, yeah, that's because, we're using so much water from the Colorado River. Unbelievable. Okay, so this is an issue. 70% of all of our fresh water on Earth is used for farming. So sometimes there is inefficient irrigation. So the farmers aren't doing it right, and they're wasting the water. Or they just don't think there's a shortage, right? So if there's poor irrigations systems, that causes problems, right? So I mentioned drip irrigation to one of your classes the other day, and not drip like what I'm wearing, but drip like literally they have pipes that go out and they just have water that just barely drips where all the plants are at. So that way you're using the water more efficiently. So problems with bad irrigation, salinization of the soil. That means you get too much salt in the soil. Okay, and you get too much salt in the soil, then the farmland is no good anymore. So that's desertification. That's adding to the problem. You reduce the amount of water in aquifers. That happens for sure. That Ogallala aquifer isn't nearly as big as it used to be. Okay, you reduce the amount of surface water in lakes and rivers, like I showed you in Lake Mead in that previous picture. This happens, right? It's happening all over the place all the time. Now, sometimes you get rain that comes in and it fixes this for a while. But in general, this is a problem. So here's another problem. In Egypt, forever, the Egyptian civilization, the reason the Fertile Crescent was there, the reason they're an agricultural hearth is because this river flooded every year after way down in the southern lands, because it starts in the south and comes up here to the north. The Nile River does. It starts in Uganda and goes through Ethiopia and the highlands. So they two rivers, the red and the blue Nile meet to form what we know as the Nile, but that's the white Nile. Okay, well, they put a dam on this in like 1976 or somewhere in there because they said the flooding was too much for the population, right? The population, they had too many people, and so they wanted to control the flooding so more people could live there. Okay, so they created Lake Nasser, the Aswan High Dam, as you see there in the picture. It doesn't flood anymore. Okay, but it's created other problems. They used to rely on the nutrients from that water to flood the land and make it better farmland. Well, that's not there anymore. That doesn't happen. So now they have to irrigate that land way more than they did before, and they have to use chemicals to grow the food, which it works, but it also dries the land out. So as a result of this, you get soil salinization, and there's way less farmland in Egypt than there used to be. So we have a growing number of people and a shrinking amount of farmland. That's not going to work, okay, over the long haul. All right, so loss of biodiversity, so loss of the animals, right, that used to live there. Okay, farmers abandon their old varieties of food. Okay, this isn't just the animals, this is the food too. Because of monocropping, they've discovered, hey, there's a real need for corn. So we're going to grow an enormous amount of corn so we can profit the most. Okay, so we don't have that diversity of corn, wheat, soybeans, and other farmland. I mean, heck, if you're only going to grow a little bit of a crop like asparagus or something, you're not going to make that much money on it. So people don't grow that nearly as much. They're going to spend their time growing something that's going to pay them more of a profit, which makes sense. Okay, but this massive agriculture, right? That's a problem. Okay, this is an offshoot of that. And remember, when you take away the wetlands and when you cut down the forests, you're also taking away from the biodiversity of the animals, of the ecosystem, because now there's not as many of them out there. And when you take away the little animals that the big animals eat, now you got another problem. Okay, so when we alter this, right, human environment interaction, when we do this, it's not good. All right. Okay. So effects on the cultural landscape, or really just effects on the landscape. It doesn't have to be cultural, although these things are cultural. This is a real picture. Okay. This is a terrace of what used to be a river valley in Vietnam that they've turned into farmland. Okay. And based on the trees there and the green, it looks like they get plenty of rainfall. So they have a system set up where there's a certain amount of water in each of these. And this rice is what this is. It's really grown. Okay, it's ready to be harvested. What you see there in green, that's rice. Okay, well, this is how they feed all these people in Southeast Asia, is because of this type of farming, but it changes the landscape. So the result of the farming is that you change the landscape. Here's another example. This is not natural. If you've flown in an airplane over the western part of the United States, you've seen this. Okay, and this is a good thing, right? You get more irrigation like this, and this is called center pivot irrigation. So literally, there's a sprayer, is that the word? And it just goes all the way around in a big circle. And that way you can grow the farmland. Well, you can tell where the water doesn't reach anymore because there's nothing there. Okay, this is center pivot irrigation. Here's another effect. This is that deforestation in the Amazon I told you about. Okay, where the government allows this in Brazil. Like, they just let them go there, and then somebody will farm that patch in the middle of the forest. And then after a couple of years, when it's not good anymore, they leave. Okay, now the trees will grow back over time in the middle of the Amazon, but it's going to take a long time. Okay, and this is damaging because it kills the animals and, of course, the trees. This next one blew my mind. I never knew about this one. This was a new one to me. This is palm oil from trees in Malaysia, and they cut down all of those trees and used them for palm oil. What the heck is palm oil? Here are the products that we have palm oil in. Okay, beverages, food, cookies, right? Personal care products, right? Cosmetics, cleaning products. I mean, it's everywhere. Okay, this is just a sampling of them. So there's a great demand for palm oil. So that's deforestation in Malaysia, okay, and other places in the southeastern Asian part of the world. Man, that's alarming. Okay, that's a problem. Okay, so here's a review. Environmental effects of agricultural land used include pollution, we talked about, land cover change, you change that landscape, desertification, we saw, soil salinization, we saw, and then conservation efforts. People are now coming in and saying we have to stop doing this, right? Slash and burn farming, terraces, irrigation, deforestation, draining wetlands, shifting cultivation, that's slash and burn farming, and pastoral nomadism, right? All of these things alter the landscape that we see. Okay. All right. That's going to be the end of this. I hope you enjoyed this and the Ed Puzzle.